Welcome to the sleep route. If you are ready to fall asleep, please fasten your seat belts before we hit the road. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Press the like button if you like it, and leave your comments in the comments, and let's start our story. Alright folks, settle in. The old rig's humming a steady tune beneath me, the kind that just lulls you into a peaceful state. We're heading north tonight, not on any paved highway, but through the mists of time, to a place where the air bites with the tang of salt and pine. Imagine yourself, if you will, not in this cab, but nestled in a small, weathered wooden hut, somewhere on the craggy coast of old Scandinavia. The year, well, let's say it's a long, long time ago. Before the rumble of diesel engines, when the world moved at the pace of the wind and the waves, the first hint of a new day here isn't the screech of an alarm, but the subtle shift in the pre-dawn darkness, a gentle lightening at the edges of the window. You'd still be wrapped in coarse wool blankets, the air inside the hut cool but not biting thanks to the banked embers in the hearth. The only sound, perhaps, is the distant cry of a gull, a lonely sentinel over the restless sea, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the morning fog begins to creep in. It's not a thick, suffocating blanket, but a soft, ethereal shroud muffling the world, blurring the lines between sea and sky, between earth and dream. You can almost feel its damp chill against your face, even from within the warmth of your covers. The smell would be the first true awakening. Not coffee, no, but the sharp, invigorating scent of brine, of wet wood, and a faint, lingering aroma of fish from yesterday's catch seeps in through the cracks in the rough-hewn timbers of your hut, a promise of the day to come. The wooden huts themselves were simple affairs, built for function and resilience against the harsh northern elements. They crouched low to the ground, often with turf roofs providing insulation, their windows small, like watchful eyes against the vast, indifferent ocean. Each hut would house a family, often several generations under one roof, their lives intertwined with the fortunes of the sea. As the fog reluctantly begins to lift, revealing the gray-green expanse of the water, the village stirs. It's not a noisy awakening, but a quiet, methodical one. You'd hear the soft creak of doors, the muffled thud of heavy boots on packed earth, the low murmur of voices carried on the damp air. Children, perhaps still drowsy, would be bundled in warm layers, their parents already moving with purpose towards the small, rough-hewn docks. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was dictated entirely by the sea, by the tides, and by the elusive schools of fish that were their very sustenance. There was no rush, no frantic hurry, just a steady, deliberate pace, born of generations of experience. The central activity, the very heartbeat of this community, would be the gathering of the nets. These weren't the vast factory-made nets of today, but painstakingly crafted webs of flax and hemp, mended and remended countless times. As the first light truly breaks through the dissipating fog, you'd see figures hunched against the lingering chill, hauling these heavy nets from the small, open boats that dotted the shore. The nets would be heavy, dripping with seawater, often tangled with seaweed, and hopefully shimmering with the silver bounty of the sea. It was back-breaking work, a testament to their quiet strength and enduring spirit. Imagine the feel of the wet ropes in your hands, coarse against your skin, the chills seeping into your bones. The air would be alive with the subtle sounds of this labor, the splash of water, the creak of timber, the rhythmic pull and release of muscles. It was a communal effort too. Neighbors would help neighbors, hands working in unison, a silent understanding passing between them. There was a quiet dignity in their movements, a deep respect for the ocean that both sustained and challenged them. This wasn't just a job. It was a way of life, passed down through the generations, etched into the very fabric of their being. The younger children, perhaps, would be watching from the shore, their eyes wide with a mixture of fascination and an unspoken understanding of their future. After the nets were brought ashore, the true work of sorting began. The fish, still alive and flopping, would be carefully separated. Some destined for immediate consumption, others for preservation. The air would thicken with the scent of fresh fish, a testament to the ocean's generosity. This entire morning ritual, from the moment the fog began to lift to the final sorting of the catch, was a deeply ingrained part of their existence, a silent prayer of gratitude and an acknowledgement of their humble place in the grand scheme of things. It was a life lived in harmony with the elements, a testament to human resilience and the enduring power of community. The road stretches on, and the hum of the engine is a steady companion. As we drift onward, let us now turn our thoughts to a particular life, one that embodies the spirit of these fishing villages. Imagine an old man, perhaps named Bjorn, his face a map of the sea's hardships, etched with lines that spoke of countless sunrises and storms. Bjorn wasn't a chieftain or a warrior, but a fisherman, a keeper of traditions, and a silent observer of the sea's mysteries. His story, like many others, was intertwined with a crucial event: the Great Herring Run. For these northern communities, the annual herring run was not just an event. It was the very pulse of their survival. It determined their feasts and their famines, their prosperity and their struggles. Old Bjorn remembered the stories his grandfather told him, tales of runs so vast the sea shimmered silver for miles, tales of lean years where the nets came up empty, and the winter winds carried the mournful cries of hunger. He had seen both, lived through both, and understood the delicate balance of their existence. One year, a winter long past, when Bjorn was but a young man, perhaps barely 20 winters old, the signs were troubling. The gulls, usually raucous and plentiful, seemed fewer, quieter. The currents felt wrong, subtle shifts that only the most experienced fishermen could discern. Whispers of unease rippled through the small village. Had the herring forsaken them? Had the sea, their provider, turned its back? Fear, cold and sharp, began to settle in the hearts of the people. They relied on the herring for food through the long, dark winter, for trade with inland communities, for the very oil that fueled their lamps. Bjorn, though young, possessed an uncanny intuition for the sea, a silent language he spoke with the tides and the wind. He would spend hours by himself, perched on a rocky outcrop, watching the water, feeling its pulse. He noticed a subtle change in the behavior of the smaller fish, a restlessness he couldn't quite explain. He observed the patterns of the seals, usually eager predators, now seemingly confused, circling aimlessly. It was a puzzle, a mystery that gnawed at him. The older fishermen, hardened by years of experience, shook their heads. "The herring are elsewhere, lad," they'd say, their voices tinged with resignation. "The sea has her own whims." But Bjorn refused to accept it. He remembered a forgotten tale, whispered by his great-grandmother about a time when the herring, for reasons unknown, had shifted their usual migration path, moving deeper, further north, driven by some unseen force. He spoke to his father, a man of quiet wisdom, who listened patiently. Perhaps, his father mused, the old tales hold some truth. The sea remembers what we forget. Encouraged, Bjorn decided to venture further than any of the other boats dared. He convinced a few trusted friends, hardy young men with strong arms and brave hearts, to join him. They set out before dawn, the air thick with apprehension, their small open boat dwarfed by the vast gray expanse. For days they sailed, pushing beyond the familiar fishing grounds, facing the open, unforgiving ocean. The winds howled, the waves rose and fell like mountains, and doubt gnawed at their resolve. They fished, but the nets came up sparse, a few cod, some mackerel, but no herring. Their supplies dwindled, their spirits waned. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them on the third day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Bjorn saw it. A faint shimmer on the distant water, a silver glint that danced on the waves. It was almost imperceptible, a trick of the fading light, but his heart leaped. They rowed harder, their muscles burning, their exhaustion forgotten. As they drew closer, the shimmer intensified, resolving into an incredible spectacle. The sea, as far as the eye could see, was alive with herring. Not just a school, but an unimaginable multitude, so dense they seemed to boil on the surface. It was the great herring run, shifted, delayed, but undeniably present. Their shouts of joy were lost in the roar of the wind, but their faces, illuminated by the last vestiges of twilight, were alight with awe and relief. They cast their nets, and the catch was instantaneous, overwhelming. They hauled in so much that their small boat sank low in the water, barely able to contain the bounty. News of their discovery spread like wildfire through the village. Other boats, emboldened by Bjorn's courage, set out. And soon the entire community was engaged in a furious, joyous harvest. The village thrived that winter, saved from the brink of hardship by the intuition and courage of one young man. Bjorn never boasted of his feat, remaining the quiet, observant fisherman he had always been. But his story became a legend, whispered around hearths on long winter nights, a reminder that sometimes listening to the subtle whispers of the world, even when others doubt, can lead to the greatest rewards. The rhythm of their lives, once threatened, was restored thanks to the silent bravery of a young man and the unpredictable, yet ultimately generous nature of the sea. The road continues its gentle descent, and the moon, a sliver of silver, begins to peek through the clouds. Let us now turn our thoughts to something more enigmatic, something that whispers of older times, of mysteries long buried beneath the waves. Imagine, if you will, the jagged coastline near our Scandinavian fishing village. Here, amidst the weathered rocks and the relentless crash of the surf, there are tales of sunken stones, not just fallen boulders, but curiously shaped formations, sometimes arranged in strange patterns, visible only during the lowest of tides, or glimpsed as ghostly shadows through the clear, shallow water. For generations, the fishermen would speak of these stones, some with a quiet reverence, others with a touch of unease. They were too regular, too intentional, to be merely natural formations. Sometimes, a net would snag on a particularly prominent upright stone, pulling it from the depths with great effort, only to reveal curious markings, faint and almost eroded by the ceaseless action of the sea. These weren't carvings of animals or ships, but abstract symbols, spirals and zigzags, unlike anything the villagers themselves created. What were they? Who placed them there? And for what purpose? Archaeologists, if they had existed in such a time and place, would have been fascinated. But in this era, the only archaeologists were the fishermen themselves. Their knowledge passed down through oral tradition, tinged with superstition and the wisdom of the sea. Some said they were the remnants of an ancient, forgotten port swallowed by a great storm centuries ago. Others believed them to be the foundations of a king's long-lost palace sunk in a mythical battle. But the most enduring whispers, those that sent a shiver down the spine on a moonless night, were of the whisper of forgotten gods. These were not the fiery, hammer-wielding gods of popular sagas. Older, more primordial deities, spirits of the deep, of the earth, and of the mist. The stones, some believed, were altars to these forgotten beings. Places where ancient rituals were performed to appease the unpredictable sea. To ensure a bountiful catch or to ward off devastating storms, imagine the scene. Cloaked figures, their faces obscured by shadows, gathered at the water's edge at twilight, chanting in a language lost to time, their offerings cast into the churning waves. The thought alone is enough to conjure a sense of deep, ancient mystery. One particular story persisted, passed down through the family of old Gudrun, the village elder. She spoke of a particularly large, flat stone known to only a few, submerged deeper than the others. It was said that on certain nights, when the moon was full and the tides exceptionally low, a faint iridescent glow could be seen emanating from beneath it. A soft, pulsating light that seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the ocean. Some claimed it was merely phosphorescence, the light of tiny sea creatures. But Gudrun, with a glint in her ancient eyes, would hint at something more. She believed it was the residual energy of the old gods, a silent testament to their enduring presence. A link to a time when the veil between their world and ours was much thinner. The villagers, while pragmatic in their daily lives, held a deep respect for such mysteries. They navigated their boats carefully around these areas, not out of fear, but out of a profound sense of awe and deference. They wouldn't disturb the stones, wouldn't attempt to decipher their meaning too deeply, for fear of angering whatever ancient forces still lingered there. It was enough to know they existed, a reminder of the vast stretches of time that had passed, of civilizations risen and fallen, swallowed by the relentless march of the waves and the shifting sands of history. The cultural exploration of these submerged relics was not through academic study, but through shared stories, through the quiet observations of generations who lived intimately with the sea. These sunken stones, these whispers of forgotten gods, became a part of the village's identity, a subtle thread woven into the fabric of their lives. They were a reminder that their existence was but a small ripple in the vast ocean of time, that their present was built upon layers of a forgotten past. And as the waves continued their eternal dance around these enigmatic formations, the secrets they held remained undisturbed, waiting for a time when perhaps the world would be ready to listen more closely to the whispers of the deep. The rhythm of their lives, you see, encompassed not just the visible world, but also the unseen, the ancient, and the perpetually mysterious. The drone of the highway stretches out, smooth and rhythmic, much like the gentle sway of a long ship on calm waters. Let us now turn our gaze from the humble wooden huts of the fishing village to a contrasting world, one of greater power and influence, yet still inextricably linked to the sea. The Jarl's Hall and the merchant ship from the south. Imagine just a short journey inland, perhaps nestled in a sheltered fjord or atop a commanding hill. The formidable dwelling of a Jarl, a powerful chieftain who held sway over a wide territory, including our quiet fishing village. His hall would be a stark contrast to the small, practical huts of the fishermen. Built of thick, dark timber, it would be much larger, designed not just for shelter, but for imposing presence. Inside, the air would be thick with the smell of roasted meat, beeswax, and perhaps the faint, sweet scent of mead. The walls would be adorned with tapestries depicting glorious battles, and the long central hearth would glow with a perpetual fire, casting dancing shadows on the faces of his retainers. This was the seat of power, a place where decisions were made that could impact the lives of everyone in the surrounding lands, including the fishermen who provided him with a portion of their catch as tribute. The Jarl himself would be a man of imposing stature, perhaps with a meticulously braided beard and heavy silver arm rings glinting on his powerful forearms. His days were not spent mending nets or cleaning fish, but in councils with his warriors, dispensing justice, planning raids or defense, and crucially, engaging in trade. While the fishermen lived a life dictated by the immediate demands of the sea, the Jarl's concerns were broader: alliances, wealth accumulation, and maintaining his authority. His table would groan under the weight of exotic foods, and his halls would echo with the boasts of warriors and the songs of skalds. Yet even in this grand setting, the sea remained a dominant force. The Jarl's wealth and influence often stemmed directly from control of maritime trade routes. His longships, far grander and more formidable than the small fishing vessels, would embark on voyages not just for fishing, but for raiding, exploration, and most importantly, trade. And it is here that we introduce the merchant ship from the south. Imagine then. A vessel unlike any seen regularly in the local waters, larger, with a deeper draft, its sails perhaps of a different cut, its hull painted in unfamiliar colors. It would arrive usually unannounced, a silent herald of distant lands. The arrival of such a ship was an event of immense significance, carried goods that were unimaginable luxuries to the average villager, and even to many within the Jarl's retinue. Spices from the east, silks from Byzantium, finely crafted metalware from distant kingdoms, wines from sunnier climes. These were the treasures that filled its hold. The Jarl's people would gather at the docks, a mix of awe and curiosity on their faces, watching as the crew, often of mixed heritage and speaking strange tongues, unloaded their cargo. The air would hum with a quiet excitement, a sense of connection to a wider world. For the Jarl, this was not just about acquiring goods. It was about power and prestige. Owning such exotic items elevated his status amongst his peers. He would trade furs, timber, dried fish, perhaps even slaves, for these sought-after commodities. The negotiations would be lengthy, conducted with a mix of shrewdness and ceremonial politeness, often with a shared feast afterwards. The merchant captain, a worldly man with tales of distant lands, would sit at the Jarl's right hand, sharing stories of storms weathered and markets exploited. The presence of the merchant ship also provided a rare glimpse into a contrasting society. while the Scandinavians were fierce, pragmatic, and deeply connected to their land and sea. The southern merchants represented a different kind of civilization, one of bustling cities, complex legal systems, and sophisticated craftsmanship. They brought not just goods, but new ideas, new ways of thinking, sometimes even new technologies, however rudimentary. The children of the Jarl's Hall, less constrained by the daily grind of survival, might gather around the merchant sailors, their eyes wide with wonder at the strange clothing, the unfamiliar accents, and the fantastic stories of lands beyond the horizon. And so, the Jarl's Hall, with its feasting and political machinations, and the occasional arrival of a merchant ship from distant lands, served as a powerful contrast to the simple, sea-bound existence of the fishing village. Yet, they were intimately connected, each relying on the other in the intricate web of ancient Scandinavian society. The humble catch of herring sustained the Jarl's household, and the Jarl's power ensured the safety of the trade routes that brought wealth and exotic goods to his people. The rhythm of their lives, while vastly different, beat with the same underlying pulse of survival exchange and the enduring influence of the northern seas. The road stretches on, a long ribbon beneath the purring engine, carrying us deeper into this quiet journey. As we drift onward, let us return to the heart of our fishing village, to an activity that was as much a ritual as a necessity. The ritual of cleaning the fish, imagine if you will. The scene after the morning's catch has been brought in. The sun, perhaps, has fully burned away the last vestiges of the fog, casting a gentle, pale light over the scene. The air is still cool, but the promise of a warmer day is in the slight stir of the breeze. The process of cleaning the fish was not a hurried, messy affair, but a methodical, almost meditative sequence of actions, often performed by the women and older children of the village. They would gather at designated spots, perhaps on smooth, flat rocks near the water's edge, or on specially constructed wooden tables. The tools were simple, sharp, bone or iron knives and wooden troughs to collect the waste. The work was repetitive, almost hypnotic, each movement precise and practiced. The hands, calloused and strong, would expertly gut and clean the fish, their movements a testament to countless hours spent in this task, a skill passed down from mother to daughter, father to son. Imagine the sound, the soft thud of fish being placed on a surface, the whispered-in slice of the knife through scale and flesh, the gentle splash as offal was discarded into the water, be quickly consumed by waiting gulls or crabs. There was a quiet hum of conversation, low and murmuring, sometimes a folk song softly sung, a rhythmic accompaniment to the work. It wasn't a chore to be dreaded, but a shared endeavor, a time for community, for gossip, for teaching the young ones the ancient ways. The scent of smoke would begin to mingle with the brine, for nearby, small fires would be tended, preparing for the next crucial stage of preservation. The waste, what wasn't immediately consumed by the opportunistic scavengers, was often used as fertilizer for their small, hardy gardens, ensuring that nothing was truly wasted in their frugal existence. Every part of the fish had a purpose, a testament to their deep respect for the bounty of the sea and their commitment to sustainable living long before the concept was ever articulated. The eyes, the guts, the bones, all would be carefully processed or returned to the earth, completing a cycle of life and nourishment. As the cleaning progressed, the air would fill not just with the scent of fresh fish, but with the distinct, pervasive scent of smoke. This wasn't the thick, acrid smoke of a forest fire, but a gentle, fragrant plume rising from small, carefully tended fires. These fires were fueled by slow-burning woods, perhaps juniper or alder, chosen for the specific aroma and preserving qualities they imparted. Nearby, simple racks would be set up, laden with the cleaned fish, ready for smoking. This preservation method was crucial, allowing them to store the abundant summer and autumn catches for the lean, cold winter months. Imagine the scene. Rows upon rows of fish, hanging from wooden poles, slowly transforming in the wisps of smoke, their silver scales dulling to a muted gold. The process was slow, requiring patience and constant attention. Too much heat and the fish would cook. Too little and they wouldn't preserve properly. It was an art honed over generations, a vital skill for survival. The smoke would cling to their clothes, their hair, their very skin, becoming an indelible part of their being, a constant reminder of their dependence on the sea and their mastery over its gifts. And as the day wore on, and the last of the fish were cleaned and placed on the racks, a quiet satisfaction would settle over the village. The immediate threat of hunger was pushed back, the future, for a while at least, secured. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was a harmonious blend of effort and reward, of ritual and practicality. The cleaning of the fish, steeped in the scent of smoke, was not just an act of preparation, but a quiet celebration of their enduring connection to the vast, generous, and sometimes unforgiving northern sea. The engine's hum is a constant comfort as we travel, the miles blurring into a meditative journey. Let us now turn our attention to another individual, a quiet force within these communities, whose life stood apart yet was deeply woven into the fabric of daily existence. Imagine a woman, perhaps named Elara, whose hands were as gentle as the first light of dawn, and whose knowledge was as deep as the fjord itself. Elara was not a fisherwoman, though she understood the sea's moods. She was the healer of the fjord, a keeper of ancient remedies, and a solace in times of pain. In these remote villages, far from any established halls of learning or grand healers, the well-being of the community rested heavily on individuals like Elara. Her knowledge wasn't gleaned from dusty scrolls, but from generations of observation, from whispered secrets passed down from her grandmother, and from an intuitive understanding of the natural world around her. She knew every herb that grew on the windswept hillsides, every moss that clung to the damp rocks, and every root that lay hidden beneath the earth. Each had its purpose, its unique power to soothe, to mend, or to alleviate suffering. Elara's days were a quiet testament to service. She would rise before the sun, often to gather fresh dew from specific plants, or to check on a simmering concoction of herbs over a low fire. Her hut, though simple like the others, had a distinct aroma, a mix of dried herbs, earthy roots, and something indefinable, comforting. People would come to her, not just with visible wounds or raging fevers, but with ailments of the spirit, with the quiet anxieties that gnawed at their hearts in the long, dark winters. She would listen patiently, her eyes kind and knowing, offering not just a poultice or a tea, but a sense of calm reassurance. One winter, a particularly brutal storm descended upon the fjord, trapping the villagers in their huts for days. The winds howled like vengeful spirits, and the snow piled high against the doors. During this isolation, a fever swept through the community, striking down young and old alike. Fear, cold and insidious, began to grip the village. The elderly, already frail, succumbed first, their breaths shallow and ragged. Panic threatened to overwhelm the quiet resolve of the villagers. Elara, despite the worsening weather and the growing despair, moved with a quiet determination. She battled through the drifts, going from hut to hut, carrying her satchel of dried herbs and a small flask of fermented berries known for their restorative properties. She brewed strong, bitter teas, dabbed cooling compresses on fevered brows, and whispered ancient incantations that were as much comfort as medicine. Her hands, nimble and practiced, would gently massage aching limbs, her voice a steady balm in the chaotic whispers of illness. She had an uncanny ability to know which herbs to combine, which remedies would work for which individual. For the wheezing cough, a decoction of pine needles and honey. For the aching joints, a poultice of heated peat moss. For the deep sadness that sometimes accompanied prolonged illness, a special brew of calming roots meant to ease the spirit into gentle sleep. Her presence alone, calm and unwavering amidst the suffering, often seemed to be half the cure. There was a young boy, little Finn, who was particularly afflicted. His breathing became shallow, his small body racked with shivers and burning heat. His parents, their faces drawn with despair, thought they would lose him. Elara stayed by his side for a day and a night, rarely sleeping, administering small sips of her potent brews, humming quiet lullabies and wiping his feverish brow. She coaxed him to eat small amounts of a thin broth made from dried fish and foraged roots. Slowly, miraculously, Finn's fever began to break. His breathing eased, and the color returned to his pale cheeks. When the storm finally lifted, revealing a world blanketed in pristine, sparkling snow, the fever had retreated. The village, though weakened, had survived. Many owed their lives, or at least their recovery, to Elara's tireless efforts. She sought no praise, no reward, merely returning to her quiet life, gathering her herbs, tending her small garden, and continuing her watch over the well-being of her people. Her story, woven into the quiet history of the village, was a testament to the enduring power of compassion, knowledge, and the silent strength of those who care for others in times of need. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not just about fishing, but about healing, about nurturing, and about the quiet heroism of everyday existence. The miles drift by, and the world outside the cab is a blur of passing trees and distant lights. Let us now delve into another layer of mystery, a deeper stratum of cultural understanding within these ancient Scandinavian lands, along certain stretches of the fjord's edge. Where the cliffs plunge steeply into the dark waters, there are hidden sea caves. These aren't just simple indentations in the rock, but often elaborate caverns carved out by millennia of relentless wave action, their entrances sometimes hidden by the tide, accessible only at specific times. And within these caves, on the smooth rock faces, are pictograms, ancient drawings that tell no obvious story. These pictograms are not the bold, clear depictions of hunting scenes or longships often found elsewhere. Instead, they are abstract, enigmatic, swirling lines, dots arranged in complex patterns, strange, elongated figures that seem neither human nor animal, sometimes resembling otherworldly beings. They are painted in pigments derived from ochre, charcoal, and minerals, miraculously preserved by the damp, cool air of the caves, protected from the harsh elements outside. For generations, the fishermen, when venturing into these hidden grottos to escape a sudden storm or to gather shellfish, would glimpse these faded images, a silent testament to a presence long past. The villagers held a quiet reverence for these caves, often avoiding them at night, or speaking of them only in hushed tones. They believed these were places of immense power, thresholds between their world and something older, something profound, and central to the interpretation of these cryptic images often was the figure of the shaman. Not a healer like Elara, but a spiritual guide, a visionary who communed with the unseen realms. The shaman would often retreat to these sea caves, sometimes for days, seeking guidance, seeking visions, seeking answers from the spirits that were believed to reside within the rock itself, within the very air of the ancient caverns. Imagine the shaman, perhaps an old man or woman, their face painted with ceremonial marks, their body adorned with charms of bone and feather. Sitting cross-legged in the cool, echoing darkness of the cave, small, flickering fire would cast dancing shadows, making the pictograms on the walls seem to writhe and pulse with a life of their own. The air would be thick with the smoke of smoldering herbs, chosen for their mind-altering properties. Helping the shaman to enter a trance state, to bridge the gap between worlds. It was during these trance states, during their shaman's visions, that the true meaning of the pictograms was believed to be revealed. The swirling lines might represent the journey of a spirit through the cosmic ocean. Strange figures perhaps were deities or ancestors or primal forces of nature. The dots, arranged in constellations, might be a celestial map, or a way to track the movements of unseen currents. The shaman's interpretations, though often cryptic, provided a framework for the community's understanding of their place in the universe, their relationship with the spirits of the land and sea, and the deeper currents of existence. These visions were not for entertainment or curiosity. They were vital for survival. The shaman might interpret a particular pattern of dots as a warning about a coming storm or a sign of a bountiful fish run in a particular area. They might reveal a ritual that needed to be performed to appease an angry spirit or to bless a new fishing season. The pictograms, therefore, were not just art. They were a sacred language, a visual record of spiritual journeys, a guide for navigating both the physical and metaphysical landscapes. The villagers would listen to the shaman's interpretations with utmost seriousness, incorporating these insights into their daily practices. They believed that by understanding the messages within the caves, they could maintain harmony with the world, avoid disaster, and secure their well-being. The sea caves, with their silent, enigmatic pictograms, and the shaman, with their profound visions, represented a deep cultural exploration of the human spirits, yearning to connect with the divine, to find meaning in the mysteries of existence, and to navigate a world both beautiful and terrifying. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not solely governed by the visible catch in their nets, but by the unseen forces and ancient wisdom whispered from the very stones of their land. The miles continue to melt away under the wheels, and the darkness outside is now almost complete, punctuated by the steady glow of the dashboard. Let us now shift our focus to an even more dramatic contrast in Scandinavian society, one that often cast a long shadow, or brought unexpected wealth to even the most remote fishing village. The Viking chieftains saga and the raid on foreign shores. While our humble fishing community lived a life of quiet subsistence, the era was also defined by powerful, ambitious chieftains. Men who looked beyond their fjords for glory, riches, and influence. Imagine a Viking chieftain, perhaps named Harald, his lineage stretching back through generations of formidable warriors and cunning leaders. His hall, even grander than the Jarls, would be a fortress in itself, perched high on a promontory overlooking the sea, its strategic position ensuring command of vital waterways. Harald's life was a constant pursuit of renown, of accumulating wealth, and of solidifying his power. We'd spend his days honing his battle skills, planning expeditions, and presiding over a retinue of loyal, battle-hardened warriors. His nights would echo with the clang of feasting, the boisterous laughter of his men, and the recitations of sagas. Epic poems detailing the heroic deeds of his ancestors and implicitly setting the stage for his own. The saga was more than just a story. It was a living history, a blueprint for honor and glory. It spoke of long voyages, of fierce battles, of plunder and conquest. And for a chieftain like Harald, these sagas were not mere entertainment. They were a call to action, a justification for venturing beyond their familiar shores. His greatest ambition was to add new, glorious chapters to his family's saga, chapters that would be sung for generations to come. This ambition often culminated in the raid on foreign shores. Imagine the meticulous preparation, the gathering of the finest longships. Sleek and swift, built for speed and shallow drafts that allowed them to navigate rivers far inland. The sharpening of axes and swords, the readying of shields, painted with fearsome symbols. The tension and excitement among the warriors, a mix of grim determination and eager anticipation of the spoils. The women of the village, including those from our fishing community, would play their part, preparing provisions, mending sails, and perhaps offering quiet prayers for their men's safe return. The departure would be a dramatic spectacle. The long ships, their dragon prows glinting in the pale northern sun, would slip silently from the fjord, their oars dipping rhythmically into the water, propelled by the powerful strokes of the warriors. The sight alone would inspire both awe and fear. Their destination often were the richer, more settled lands to the south, the monasteries of Ireland, the fertile lands of Anglo-Saxon England, the bustling trade towns of Francia. These were lands brimming with silver, with fine cloth, with valuable artifacts, treasures that were scarce in their own rugged lands. Imagine the sudden, brutal impact of their arrival. The long ships emerging from the mist or sweeping around a headland, their sails unfurled like the wings of predatory birds. The sound of the war horns, chilling and resonant, echoing across peaceful fields. The clash of steel, the shouts of battle, the terrified cries of those unprepared for such a swift and brutal onslaught. It was a terrifying reality for those on the receiving end, but for the Vikings, it was a means to an end. To acquire wealth, to gain prestige, and to ensure the survival and prosperity of their own communities, albeit through a violent exchange. The return of the Viking chieftain was a triumphant affair. The longships, now laden with plunder, would re-enter the fjord, their sails perhaps tattered, but their holds heavy. The warriors, weary but jubilant, would be greeted as heroes. The Jarl's Hall would once again become a scene of feasting, but now with even greater revelry, fueled by the new riches. Silver arm rings would be distributed, fine silks displayed, exotic foods consumed. The sagas would be updated, new verses added, celebrating the chieftain's prowess and the valor of his warriors. While the fishing village might not have directly participated in these raids, their lives were indirectly affected. The Jarl, flush with new wealth, might demand a greater tribute. but he might also invest in new tools or offer protection against other raiding parties. Some young men, perhaps chafing against the quiet life of fishing, might be inspired by the sagas and join the chieftain's retinue, seeking glory and adventure on foreign shores. The contrast between the simple, cyclical life of the fisherman and the dramatic, expansive life of the Viking chieftain was immense. Yet, both were products of the same rugged land, shaped by the same powerful sea, and driven by different but equally compelling human desires. The rhythm of their lives, you see, encompassed not just the gentle sway of fishing boats, but the powerful beat of war drums on distant shores. The road ahead is bathed in the soft glow of the dashboard lights, a steady presence as we continue our quiet journey. Let us now settle into the serene atmosphere of the Scandinavian fishing village. As the days grew shorter and the nights grew longer, bringing with them the deep chill of winter, imagine yourself back in one of those sturdy wooden huts, but now the scene is transformed by the presence of its beating heart, the warmth of the hearth. As the short, pale sun dipped below the horizon, often as early as mid-afternoon in the deepest winter, life retreated indoors. The hearth, a simple stone construction in the center of the hut, became the focal point of existence. A perpetual fire would burn there, carefully tended, its embers glowing a comforting red. The smell of wood smoke, now trapped pleasantly within the hut, mingled with the lingering sense of dried fish and perhaps a simmering stew. This wasn't just a source of heat. It was the lifeblood of the home, a gathering place, a silent guardian against the encroaching cold and darkness. Imagine the soft crackle and pop of the burning wood, a gentle lullaby that filled the quiet space. The flickering light would dance across the faces of the family members gathered close around its warmth. Shadows would stretch and shrink on the rough-hewn walls, creating an intimate, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Hands still calloused from the day's tasks would be held out to the flames, drawing in the comforting heat. The simple act of tending the fire, adding a new log, stirring the embers, became a rhythmic, reassuring part of the evening. This was the time for quiet activity, for mending nets indoors, for carving simple tools from wood or bone, for preparing for the next day's chores, even if those chores were simply surviving the harsh elements. But more importantly, the long winter nights around the hearth were the prime time for the tales of winter nights, with the outside world a frozen, formidable presence. Stories became a vital form of entertainment, education, and connection. Children, their eyes wide with wonder, would huddle closer as an elder began a story. These weren't just simple fables. They were the oral history of their people. Tales of ancient ancestors, brave fishermen who defied the sea's wrath, wise women who healed the sick, and clever tricksters who outsmarted formidable beasts. They spoke of the changing seasons, of the habits of the fish, of the signs in the sky and on the waves. The stories were infused with the practical wisdom of survival, interwoven with elements of myth and magic. Imagine the cadence of the storyteller's voice, slow and steady, sometimes dropping to a whisper for a moment of suspense, sometimes rising slightly in triumph. The pauses would be as important as the words, allowing the listeners to conjure images in their minds, to feel the chill of the imaginary blizzard or the thrill of the imaginary catch. These were not just stories for sleep, but stories for life, for learning, for understanding their place in the vast ancient world. The younger generation would absorb these tales, not just as entertainment, but as vital lessons. They learned about courage, about perseverance, about the importance of community, and about respect for the natural world. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was deeply cyclical, intertwined with the seasons. The bustling activity of summer and autumn fishing gave way to the quiet, introspective warmth of winter, where the hearth fire and the shared stories nourished their bodies and their souls, preparing them for the return of the light and the renewed bounty of the sea. The journey continues, a steady forward motion, much like the relentless progress of a long ship across an open sea. Let us now turn our attention to an individual whose ambition, though perhaps not for conquest, led to a significant event for his community. Imagine a man named Ragnar, nicknamed the Red not for his temper, but for the striking color of his hair, a vibrant contrast to the often muted tones of the northern landscape. Ragnar was a fisherman, like his fathers before him, but with a restless spirit and an insatiable curiosity about what lay beyond the familiar horizons. His story is defined by the voyage of Ragnar the Red and the discovery of new fishing grounds. For generations, the fishermen of our village had relied on the same established fishing grounds, passed down from their ancestors. They knew the depths, the currents, the best places for nets, but the yields, while sufficient, were sometimes unpredictable. There were whispers of areas further north, rumored to be teeming with fish, but the dangers were too great, the distances too vast, for anyone to truly venture there. The northern seas were treacherous, filled with hidden shoals, unpredictable storms, and the chilling tales of sea monsters. But Ragnar was different. He had listened intently to the tales of the Jarls' longships, not for their plunder, but for their mastery of navigation, their ability to sail into the unknown and return. He studied the stars on clear nights, memorized the patterns of the waves, and keenly observed the flight paths of migrating birds. Believing they held clues to distant lands, his quiet obsession was to find a new, reliable source of fish for his village, to ensure their prosperity, to ease the burden of the lean years. One spring, after a particularly harsh winter that had depleted their stores, Ragnar announced his intention to undertake a perilous voyage north. The older villagers were skeptical, some outright fearful. "It's madness, Ragnar," they'd say. "The sea will claim you." But a few younger, bolder men, inspired by his quiet determination, agreed to join him. They prepared their largest fishing vessel, reinforced its hull, packed it with dried provisions, fresh water, and extra lengths of rope and nets. It was a fishing expedition, yes, but it felt more like an exploration into the very maw of the unknown. They set sail under a pale, hesitant sun, leaving behind anxious families. For days they battled relentless headwinds and towering waves, the small boat pitching and rolling, a tiny speck on the vast expanse. The cold was biting, seeping into their bones. They saw no familiar landmarks, only endless gray water and the occasional lonely rock outcrop. Doubt gnawed at their resolve, and the young men began to question Ragnar's wisdom. "Are we truly lost, Ragnar?" they'd ask, their voices strained with exhaustion. But Ragnar, though weary, held firm. He consulted his crude maps, etched onto pieces of bark, and continued to steer by the stars and the subtle shift of the currents. And then, on the seventh day, as a thick fog began to lift, revealing the jagged outlines of an unfamiliar coast, they saw it. Not just a few gulls, but hundreds, swirling and diving above a particular stretch of water. And beneath them, the surface of the sea was alive, boiling with the activity of an incredible fish school. Immense shoals of cod and haddock, larger and more plentiful than anything they had ever seen in their familiar waters. It was the discovery of new fishing grounds, untouched and abundant. Their nets, when cast, came up bursting with fish, almost too heavy to haul. The men shouted with a mixture of disbelief and triumphant joy. They spent days fishing, working tirelessly, their boat sinking low with the sheer weight of the catch. They salted and dried as much as they could, filling every available space. The return journey, though still challenging, was filled with a buoyant spirit. When Ragnar's boat finally sailed back into the home fjord, its hull riding low in the water, the entire village rushed to the shore. The sight of the overflowing catch was met with shouts of relief and celebration. Ragnar, the quiet dreamer, had become Ragnar the Discoverer, a hero who had secured their future. He hadn't sought glory in battle, but in the quiet pursuit of abundance for his people. His voyage became a cornerstone of their local lore, a saga whispered around the hearth on subsequent winter nights. Not of fierce warriors, but of quiet courage and the profound impact of seeking beyond the known. The discovery ensured years of prosperity, reducing the anxieties of lean seasons. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was forever changed by the bold decision of one man to venture into the unknown, to listen to the whispers of curiosity, and to unlock the silent bounty of the northern seas. The engine hums its steady tune, a soothing backdrop to our passage through time and tale. Let us now turn our attention to another silent testament to the past, something that stands proudly yet enigmatically on the land itself. A place exposed to the full force of the wind and the ceaseless roar of the waves. And on this headland, weathered by centuries of salt and storm, stand several runic stones. These aren't just random boulders, but upright slabs of gray stone, carefully shaped and intricately carved with mysterious symbols. These are not the pictograms of the sea caves, but something different, more formalized. The ancient script of the North runes. They are straight-lined, angular characters, sometimes forming words, sometimes simply standing as individual symbols, their meaning often obscured by the passage of time and the shifting sands of language. For generations, the villagers would pass by these stones on their way to the fishing boats, their presence a constant, silent reminder of a distant past, a connection to the very earliest inhabitants of this land. The runic stones were not mere decorations. They were markers, memorials, and often silent messages from the long dead. Some believed they marked ancient burial sites, the final resting places of revered ancestors, chieftains, wise women, or legendary warriors. Others thought they commemorated significant events, a great battle fought on these very shores, a bountiful harvest, or a devastating storm that claimed many lives. The truth, however, was often lost to the mists of time. The precise meaning of many of the carvings faded into obscurity. Yet, despite the loss of precise translation, the stones held immense cultural significance. They were seen as a direct link to the language of the ancestors. Even if the exact words were unknown, the very act of carving and erecting these stones spoke of a sophisticated culture. A people who valued memory, who wished to communicate across generations. The villagers, though largely illiterate in the modern sense, understood the power of these symbols. They knew that each mark was imbued with meaning, a whisper from the past, a silent story waiting to be heard by those who possessed the key. Imagine an elder, perhaps a keeper of the village's oral traditions, standing before one of these stones. They might trace the weathered lines with a gnarled finger, speaking softly, not translating the runes word for word, but interpreting their broader context, their spiritual resonance. They might tell stories that had become intertwined with the stones over generations, tales of the warrior buried beneath, or the great whale hunt that the stones supposedly commemorated. The runes in this sense became mnemonic devices, prompts for recalling the rich tapestry of their shared history. Sometimes a young person, curious and bold, might try to copy the symbols, to understand their shapes, to feel the weight of their history in their hands. They might press damp cloth into the carvings to reveal their intricate detail, marveling at the skill of the long-dead carvers. This quiet cultural exploration was not about academic study, but about an intuitive connection to their heritage, a sense of belonging to a lineage that stretched back further than memory. The runic stones were also believed to possess protective qualities. Fishermen, setting out on a dangerous voyage, might pause briefly beside them, touching the cold stone, seeking a silent blessing from their ancestors. They were a constant, unwavering presence, enduring through storm and sun, a symbol of the enduring spirit of their people. They reminded the villagers that while individual lives might be fleeting, the collective memory, etched into stone and passed down through spoken word, could endure for millennia. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not solely focused on the present catch, but resonated deeply with the silent, powerful echoes of the past, whispering from the very stones that overlooked their homes. The road stretches out, steady and calm, as we continue our journey through the quiet narratives of the past. Let us now turn our thoughts to a contrasting aspect of elite life, one that brought not just material wealth, but intellectual and artistic richness to the powerful chieftains of ancient Scandinavia. The bard's grand performance and the patronage of the chieftain. While the humble fishing village experienced its simple, everyday joys, the halls of the powerful resonated with a different kind of cultural expression. Imagine then the Jarls or Chieftains' Hall. Not on a day of feasting or war planning, but on an evening of cultural celebration. The air would be filled not with the clang of weapons or the shouts of revelry, but with a different kind of sound, the resonant voice of a bard. These bards, they were poets, historians, genealogists, and sometimes even political commentators. They held a revered position within the chieftain's court, their artistry a source of prestige and a powerful tool for shaping perception. A grand performance by a bard was a meticulously crafted event. The hall would be hushed, the warriors and their families gathered around the long hearth, their eyes fixed on the storyteller. The bard, perhaps a traveling scholar or a retainer living permanently in the chieftain's service, would command attention with their presence. They might carry a small, stringed instrument, like a lyre or a harp, which they would pluck gently, adding a subtle musical accompaniment to their words. Their performances were not simply recited. They were enacted. The bard would use their voice with incredible skill, shifting tone, tempo, and volume to convey the epic sweep of a saga, the ferocity of a battle, the pathos of a tragic love story, or the sly humor of a cunning trickster tale. The language would be rich with complex metaphors, intricate alliterations, and archaic poetic forms, demonstrating the bard's mastery of their craft. This was a language of power and beauty, understood and appreciated by the elite. Imagine a tale of a long ship cutting through the waves, its prow rearing like a dragon, or a detailed description of a hero's gleaming armor. Each rivet and plate brought to life by the bard's words. These weren't just stories for entertainment. They were mnemonic devices, preserving the history and lineage of the chieftains' family, recounting their glorious victories, and sometimes even subtly criticizing their failures. The sagas they wove were the very fabric of their cultural identity, shaping their values and inspiring their actions. The patronage of the chieftain was essential for the bard's existence. A powerful chieftain would employ several bards, providing them with food, lodging, often valuable gifts like silver arm rings or finely crafted cloaks in exchange for their service. This patronage was not an act of charity, but a strategic investment. A skilled bard could immortalize a chieftain's deeds, ensuring his fame would echo through the generations. They could inspire loyalty in his warriors, bolster morale, and even intimidate rivals through the power of their words. A chieftain without a bard was a chieftain whose legacy might fade into obscurity. This relationship created a symbiotic ecosystem. The chieftain provided the stability and resources, and the bard provided the cultural memory, the artistic expression, and the intangible legacy that extended beyond mere conquest. While the fishing villagers created their own simple songs and told their quiet hearthside tales, the chieftain's hall fostered a more formalized, professionalized, artistic tradition. It was a place where language was elevated to an art form, where history was sung into being, and where the human desire for meaning and legacy found its most sophisticated expression. The bard's grand performance was therefore a powerful counterpoint to the pragmatic, survival-focused lives of the common folk. It spoke of a society that, even amidst its harsh realities, valued intellectual pursuit, poetic expression, and the enduring power of narrative. The rhythm of their lives, you see, pulsed not just with the tides and the toil, but with the majestic cadence of ancient verses, echoing through the grand halls, carried on the breath of the skilled storyteller, ensuring that the deeds of the powerful would live on, long after their earthly reign had ended. The engine hums a steady, almost whispered note now, a perfect companion for the quiet hours ahead.
Yes!
As we continue our tranquil journey, let us once more return to the intimate scene of our Scandinavian fishing village, particularly focusing on the subtle beauty of daily routines, even amidst the elements. Imagine, if you will, a day not of bright sun or biting fog, but of gentle rain. It's not a storm, but a soft, persistent drizzle, softening the edges of the world, making the colors of the landscape deeper and richer. The wooden huts, which we've come to know as sturdy shelters, now seem to absorb the moisture, their timbers darkening, their turf roofs drinking in the gentle blessing from the sky. The air outside is cool, fresh, and imbued with the damp scent of earth and wet wood. Inside, the hearth still crackles, but perhaps with a slightly lower, more contemplative flame. The sounds of the rain become a natural symphony, the soft drumming on the turf roof, the gentle patter against the small windows, the drip from the eaves onto the packed earth below. It's a sound that encourages introspection, a slowing down of the world. And despite the rain, or perhaps because of it, the ritual of cleaning the fish still continues. It might be moved slightly under the overhang of a larger hut, or beneath a makeshift lean-to of stretched animal hides. But the rhythmic work persists. The women and older children, perhaps now with hoods pulled up or simple wool shawls draped over their heads, continue their precise, practiced movements. The knives glint dully in the diffused light, separating flesh from bone, preparing the bounty of the sea. Imagine the feel of the cool, wet fish in your hands, the slickness of its scales. The rain would mix with the seawater dripping from the fish, making small puddles on the ground, reflecting the gray sky. Yet, there is no complaint, no hurry. The work is simply done, a part of the day's unbreakable rhythm. The quiet conversations continue, perhaps a little more subdued, their voices softened by the pervasive sound of the rain. There is a sense of peaceful resignation, an acceptance of the elements as an integral part of their existence. The gentle rain also brings out certain smells that are distinct from the usual brine and smoke. The earth seems to breathe, releasing the scent of damp soil, of wet moss from the stones, and the faint, sweet perfume of pine from the distant forest, carried on the moist air. These are the subtle, earthy fragrances that ground them, reminding them of the land's enduring presence, even as the sea dominates their lives. The rain feeds the small springs and streams that tumble down from the hillsides, ensuring a supply of fresh water, another quiet blessing that sustains them. Children, perhaps, would be playing closer to the huts, finding shelter in doorways, their laughter, though muffled by the rain, still a light note in the quiet scene. They might be collecting rainwater in small wooden bowls, or watching the rivulets carve temporary paths in the earth. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not simply about fighting the elements, but about living with them, embracing their presence, finding moments of quiet beauty and enduring purpose, even in the midst of a persistent drizzle. The scene of the wooden huts, quietly enduring the gentle rain, with the rhythmic work of cleaning the fish continuing beneath their shelter, paints a picture of resilience and harmony, speaks of a deep connection to their environment, a profound understanding that life, all its forms, is interconnected and sustained by the subtle cycles of nature. The quiet sound of the rain, the steady work, the comforting presence of their homes, these were the threads that wove together the fabric of their daily existence, binding them to their land and to each other. The smooth drone of the engine lulls us onward, past the sleeping landscapes, into the quiet depths of historical reflection. Let us now turn our thoughts to a different kind of journey, one born not of a chieftain's ambition or a fisherman's curiosity, but of the quiet, sometimes desperate, hope for a better life. Imagine a young man, perhaps named Eric, whose eyes held a flicker of longing for horizons unseen. His story is one of the emigrants' farewell and the promise of distant shores. While our fishing village was often self-sufficient, life was undeniably hard. The sea, while generous, was also fickle. Winters could be devastating, harvests lean, and the land, though beautiful, often yielded little beyond what was necessary for mere survival. For some, the familiar rhythms, however comforting, eventually felt constricting. Whispers would filter back from trading ships, tales of lands to the west, vast and fertile, where forests teemed with game and rivers ran rich with salmon, where land was plentiful and opportunities seemingly endless. Eric, perhaps the youngest son of a large family, realized that his future in the village was limited. There was little new land to cultivate, and the fishing grounds, though now supplemented by Ragnar's discovery, were still finite, embellished, perhaps of the Norse settlements across the great ocean, of Iceland and Greenland, of Vinland even further west. Lands that promised a fresh start, a chance to forge a new destiny. The idea, initially a fleeting thought, began to take root, blossoming into a powerful desire. The decision to leave was not made lightly. It meant a wrenching separation from family, from the familiar sounds and smells of home, from the comforting presence of the wooden huts and the constant murmur of the fjord. It was a leap into the profound unknown, a journey fraught with peril. The farewell was a quiet affair, tinged with both sorrow and a fierce, unspoken hope. Imagine Eric standing on the small dock, his simple possessions bundled beside him, his family gathered around, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and profound sadness. There would be embraces, perhaps a few whispered blessings, a small, hand-carved charm pressed into his palm for good luck. The elderly, too frail to embark on such a perilous journey, would offer their wisdom, their eyes reflecting the weight of generations who had never ventured beyond their own fjord. The children, perhaps too young to fully grasp the finality of the moment, would watch with a mixture of curiosity and a vague sense of loss. The air would be thick with unspoken emotions, a silent testament to the bonds of kinship and community. Eric would board a ship bound for distant shores, not a warship laden with plunder, but likely a sturdy Nair, a merchant vessel designed for carrying cargo and passengers across the open ocean. The voyage itself would be an immense challenge, weeks, perhaps months at sea, battling storms, navigating by the sun and stars, facing the constant threat of hunger and disease. Imagine the endless expanse of the ocean, the towering waves, the chilling winds, the vast empty sky above. It was a journey that tested the very limits of human endurance. But it was also a journey fueled by the promise of distant shores, the hope of fertile land, of a prosperous future for his descendants, of escaping the cycles of scarcity that sometimes plagued his homeland. It was a testament to the enduring human spirit, its capacity for courage, its willingness to face immense hardship for the sake of a better life. Eric's story, while an individual one, was echoed by countless others throughout Scandinavian history. A constant outflow of people seeking new opportunities, leaving their mark on distant lands. The emigrant's farewell was a poignant reminder that even in a seemingly settled, traditional society, there were always currents of change, always individuals drawn by the siren call of the unknown. His departure, a quiet ripple in the life of the village, nonetheless represented a profound shift, a connection to a wider world beyond the fjord. The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not entirely insular. It was often punctuated by such departures, by the brave decisions of those who sought to weave their own new chapter on a distant shore, leaving behind a silent longing and a quiet hope in the hearts of those who remained. The hum of the engine is a soft drone now, carrying us gently through the depths of time. Let us now turn to a profound and enduring aspect of ancient Scandinavian culture, one that speaks of their relationship with the afterlife and the enduring presence of their ancestors, the burial mounds, and the whispers of the dead. Imagine, scotched beyond the clusters of wooden huts, perhaps on a gentle rise or nestled within a small grove of ancient trees, the distinctive shapes of burial mounds. These aren't simple graves, but carefully constructed earthen hills, often large and imposing, some covered with stones, others with turf, rising subtly from the landscape. For the villagers, these mounds were more than just resting places for the departed. They were sacred sites, visible reminders of their lineage, tangible connections to those who had walked the land before them. Each mound represented a link in the chain of generations, a silent testament to the continuity of their people. They were imbued with a quiet power, a sense of solemnity that permeated the landscape. Archaeologically, these mounds are treasure troves, offering glimpses into the lives and beliefs of the ancient Scandinavians. Within them, sometimes in elaborate timber chambers or stone-lined cists, were found the remains of individuals, often accompanied by grave goods. Objects carefully placed to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. These might include weapons for a warrior, tools for a craftsman, jewelry for a woman, or even a simple wooden toy for a child. Each item whispered a story, revealing details about their daily lives, their skills, and their social status. But for the villagers themselves, the mounds held a more immediate spiritual significance. They believed that the dead, particularly revered ancestors, continued to exert an influence on the living. These were not frightening ghosts, but often benevolent spirits, guardians of the family and the land. They were seen as protectors, their presence ensuring the fertility of the soil, the abundance of the sea, and the well-being of the community. Imagine a villager, perhaps burdened by a difficult decision, walking quietly towards one of these mounds at twilight. They might sit for a while in silent contemplation, listening for the whispers of the dead. These weren't audible voices, but rather a feeling, an intuition, a sense of guidance flowing from the ancient earth. They might offer a small libation, a cup of mead, a piece of bread, placed reverently on the mound, a gesture of respect and a silent plea for wisdom. Children would be taught from a young age to respect the mounds, to understand their significance. They would learn the names of the ancestors buried within, hearing stories of their deeds and their wisdom. This deep cultural exploration of death and ancestry was fundamental to their worldview. It emphasized the interconnectedness of past, present, and future, and the idea that life was a continuous cycle, with the dead always present, always watching. Sometimes, during important communal events, the planting of crops, the launching of new boats, or the blessing of a marriage, a small ceremony might take place near the mounds. The elders would speak of the ancestors, invoking their blessings, seeking their continued protection. The presence of the mounds grounded them, connecting their immediate struggles and joys to the vast, enduring lineage of their people. The burial mounds, therefore, were not just silent monuments. They were active participants in the spiritual life of the village. They were a constant reminder of mortality, yes, but also of immortality, not of individual life, but of the collective spirit of their community, passed down through the generations, silently tended by the earth itself. Ooh! The rhythm of their lives, you see, was not solely bound by the cycles of the sun and moon, but by the deeper, more ancient rhythms of life and death, eternally intertwined, echoing from the silent, hallowed earth. The final leg of our journey unfolds, and the quiet hum of the engine now feels like a gentle lullaby. Let us now conclude our exploration by returning to the contrasting world of the elite, observing a powerful ritual that bound together chieftains and cemented alliances. The great feast in the Jarl's Hall and the diplomacy of gift-giving, while the fishing villagers celebrated their smaller, more intimate triumphs. The powerful Jarls engaged in grand displays of wealth and generosity to maintain their influence and secure their power. Imagine the Jarl's Hall, not in quiet contemplation, but alive with a vibrant energy. A great feast was an event of immense significance, far more than a simple meal. It was a carefully orchestrated spectacle, a demonstration of the Jarl's wealth, his hospitality, and his power. The hall would be ablaze with the light of countless torches and oil lamps, casting a warm, flickering glow on the carved wooden pillars and the faces of the assembled guests. The air would be thick with the intoxicating aromas of roasted meats, wild boar, venison, perhaps even a whole ox, simmering stews, freshly baked bread, and the sweet, heavy scent of overflowing barrels of mead. Guests would arrive from far and wide, neighboring chieftains and their retinues, respected warriors, successful merchants, and perhaps even visiting skalds and artisans. The atmosphere would be one of boisterous camaraderie, punctuated by hearty laughter, the clatter of drinking horns, and the strumming of lyres. Servants would move silently, attending to every need, ensuring that no guest's horn was ever empty. This was a time for celebrating victories, forging new bonds, and reaffirming old alliances. The Jarl, seated at the head of the great table, would preside over the feast with an air of dignified authority. His own table would be laden with the finest delicacies, and he would ensure that his most important guests were given places of honor. The feast would last for hours, sometimes even days, a marathon of eating, drinking, and storytelling. Warriors would recount their battles, merchants would share tales of distant lands, and the bard would, of course, be called upon to sing sagas of ancient heroes, intertwining them subtly with praise for the current Jarl. But beyond the mere revelry, the feast served a crucial purpose: the diplomacy of gift-giving. This was a complex, nuanced system of exchange that was central to maintaining social order and political power in ancient Scandinavian society. The chieftain's generosity was a direct reflection of his status and his ability to command loyalty. During the feast or at its culmination, the Jarl would formally present gifts to his most important guests. These weren't just trinkets. They were often highly valuable items. Intricately crafted silver arm rings, finely woven cloaks, ornate swords, or even slaves captured in raids. Imagine the moment. The Jarl, perhaps holding a gleaming silver arm ring, would address a visiting chieftain, praising his valor or his loyalty, and then bestow the gift. The recipient would accept with appropriate words of gratitude, perhaps pledging their allegiance or promising a reciprocal favor in the future. These gifts were not simply acts of kindness. They were binding agreements, tangible symbols of political alliances, and a means of distributing wealth throughout the chieftain's sphere of influence. A gift refused was an insult. A gift accepted meant an obligation. This constant exchange of gifts created a complex web of patronage and loyalty, essential for a society that lacked formal written laws or a centralized government. The feast, therefore, was the stage upon which these alliances were publicly forged and reaffirmed, ensuring stability and cooperation between powerful families and regions. For our humble fishing village, the prosperity of their Jarl, demonstrated through such feasts, could mean greater protection from raids or access to more valuable trade goods. The great feast, with its lavish displays and intricate gift-giving rituals, stood in stark contrast to the simple, communal meals around a humble hearth. It highlighted the vast differences in wealth and power that existed within ancient Scandinavian society. Yet both the humble fisherman and the mighty Jarl were bound by unspoken codes of honor, community, and survival in a harsh, beautiful land. The rhythm of their lives, you see, encompassed not just the quiet dignity of daily toil, but the grand, resonant echoes of power, generosity, and the enduring human desire for alliance and legacy, played out in the shimmering light of a great hall. And so, we have gently reached the end of this quiet journey. This was the final chapter of our story for tonight. I hope it brought you peace, calm, and a step closer to restful sleep. Thank you for listening. We'll meet again in the next video. Till then, sleep well.